When humans enter unfamiliar spaces, we often build mental maps to find our way. But do rats operate similarly? Do they construct internal representations of space, or rely on simpler mechanisms, like stimulus response habits or visual familiarity? This question has long intrigued behavioral scientists. A series of classic experiments has attempted to uncover how rats interpret spatial environments and make navigation decisions. In 1946, Edward Tolman proposed that rats may not simply follow learned motor patterns, but instead form expectations about where a goal such as food might be located. In his study, rats were first trained to travel through a complex maze from point A to point G, where food was placed. After learning this route, the familiar path was blocked, and the rats were placed at a central hub with 12 new outward paths. If rats had merely developed a directional habit, they would likely turn in the same direction as before. However, many selected the path aligned with the goal's former location, despite the rearranged maze structure. This behavior suggested that the rats might have retained a spatial estimate of the goal's position, an early sign of what Tolman termed a cognitive map. However, some researchers argue that such behavior does not necessarily require a spatial map. Sterzel et al. 2008 proposed the scene matching hypothesis, which suggests that rats store visual snapshots of their environment. When navigating, they rotate their heads and bodies to find a scene that matches their stored memory of the goal location. This strategy relies on egocentric visual comparison rather than abstract spatial reasoning. Supporting evidence shows that minor changes in environmental cues such as landmark color or placement can disrupt navigation success, even when the goal location remains constant. Thus, what might appear as flexible spatial navigation may instead reflect a relatively simple, visually driven process. Further evidence comes from the Morris Water Maze, a widely used experiment in spatial learning. In this task, rats are placed in a circular pool with a hidden underwater platform initially. They swim randomly until they locate the platform. With repetition, they begin to swim directly to the platform. Guided by visual cues around the room like shapes or patterns placed on the walls, this behavior suggests rats learn spatial relationships among external landmarks to find hidden goals, unlike path memorization. This strategy involves referencing environmental features, a process that supports the idea of context-sensitive navigation. Taken together, these experiments suggest that rats do not rely on a single method to navigate. They may use a combination of expectation-based spatial reasoning, visual matching, and cue referencing, depending on the structure of the environment and the information available.